una život očima kroz domenu. Technology as a spark for growth. Please welcome the Executive Chairman of Google, Mr. Eric Schmidt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure, indeed a privilege, to introduce to you tonight Mr. Eric Schmidt, who has kindly agreed to talk to us about technology as a spark of growth and then answer our questions, subject, of course, to the unavoidable time constraints. I can think of very few people in the world who have been instrumental in changing the way we live, the way we interact, and especially the way we access knowledge. Among those very few is surely Mr. Eric Schmidt, presently Executive Chairman of Google, an iconic company in many ways. Again, I can of novel. Google was set up in 1998. Amazing if you think about it, the company is only 15 years old. The founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, recruited Schmidt in 2001 to run their new company. He remained as CEO of Google until 2011, when he became executive chairman.
I've been to Greece many times, but I'd like to start by thanking you all for inventing Mac, something which I like a lot. And there's a lot of other things that you invented too, democracy, a few other things like that. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about things which I think are important and how the world will change. So I want to start by thanking you for inventing Mac. If you look at the history, if you look at what you represent, you have really been a beacon of hope for many of us in the inspiration and the structures that you all invented. And what I really want to talk about now is economic development. And I would argue that the horrific situation that you have been through for the last few years is an opportunity to define some new truths, to actually design some new principles, which I hope to offer and perhaps we can debate. I'm quite convinced that part of the solution to the problems that you have so difficult, that you have suffered through, is to understand the role of innovation and invention and the role of the internet and the web. And I want to talk about that. I've become convinced that not only is the internet world and establishes a new competitiveness that we'll all face going forward. I think that from a Greece perspective, the bad stuff is behind you and the good news is ahead. And that's a great position to be in terms of opportunity, change, and investment. And I say that with the humility of someone who's coming from America, which just shut down its government. So, you see this in the United States, you see it here. With the efficiency of globalized technology and these distribution networks, it's hard for the original, the traditional economics which favor a local company and a local country and a local market to really dominate. And what's interesting is that when you read the economic analysis, everything gets even more pessimistic. And of course, most politicians seem to lack a coherent plan to fix any of this. It's interesting, I want an aging society that's not creating jobs, and their political system does not allow any change whatsoever. And they've gone from being incredibly relevant, right, 20 years ago, to increasingly being eclipsed by the Chinese, the Koreans, and so forth and so on, which annoys them no end. What's interesting is that as in the course of this, they've had roughly 22 years of recession, and they've ended up with a lost generation as a result. Global, right? High-skilled jobs have increased, and low-skilled service jobs have increased, but that middle, of people who are doing manufacturing or somewhat repetitive jobs that require some skill, but they're not the most educated jobs, if you will, are being replaced by computers. They're being replaced by automation, and they're not coming back. So, the replacement of those jobs by automation and globalization. Manufacturing jobs, which used to drive all of this, have largely moved to low-wage places. Advanced manufacturing jobs are still present in Europe and the United States, but the average manufacturing job that existed here for thousands of years, demographic problem. People have covered this extensively, but no one has figured out a way to solve this problem. The IMF predicts that in 2050, the ratio of workers to retired people will be shrunk by half. It's a huge change demographically, coming to all of us in mature democracies. Makes their problem even worse 10 years from now. So we're all getting ourselves set up for the same problem. The next thing that's happened is that companies have gotten smarter about capital. It used to be when companies would add, they'd have profits, they would take their profits and they would hire people. But now from their perspective, they take up capital and the first thing they do is they automate. And in fact, capital spending in the United States is now back pretty much to 2000 level before the crash, whereas employment, of course, is not. So it seems to me that the unemployment problem, which is very severe here and affecting all of us, is a problem that we need to address systematically, coherently, and globally. And it bothers me that the result of this is that we're trying to make governments more efficient through technology. That's a source of jobs that goes away. Private sector is growing. Jobs are also going away there on a net basis. What happens? This is a serious crisis. And not just a Greek crisis, a European crisis, a Western democracy crisis, an American crisis, you name it. How do we get ourselves out of this? I think it starts with innovation. And it's flourishing, by the way. New ideas are coming out all the time. And technology innovation, it's interesting that technological innovation has driven pretty much all human progress. You forget this. That between roughly, when this country started, 5000 BC or so, to roughly the 18th century, as best economists can calculate, the productivity is the GDP doubled over 2,000 years. In other words, almost no growth. Since the industrial age, the same metric has grown up by 33 times. That's how profound the innovation and the invention that created the industrial age, which we all benefit from. Look at the building around us, look at the lights, look at the electric power, the microphone. Remember that 100 years ago, this microphone wouldn't have existed and I'd be screaming, right? And there'd be a lot fewer of you for all the reasons that I said. So, and what's interesting is that people now say, okay, well that's true, we had this huge growth rate, but it's different now. That somehow we're not going to be, although the innovation will occur, it's not going to be good innovation. It's not going to create these jobs. So I just disagree. People will say, oh, it's different today. Technology is reducing the need for human employment, and there's no direct line from innovation to real jobs. It's not borne out by the facts. There's an Italian economist, his name is Enrico Moretti, I'll give you many statistics, but that's one, that has figured out that for each high-tech job in a city, there are 5 other jobs created. It's very interesting. One high-tech job creates 5 other high-tech and non-high-tech jobs. So it's obviously skilled occupations, lawyers, teachers, you need all of that for a high-tech person, but you also need waiters, hairdressers, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So remember the leverage, remember the economic leverage of innovation and these jobs is quite real. And it's right in your hands. I spoke with your Prime Minister about this afternoon. He understands this argument and is very supportive. It's about creating high-tech jobs in this country that will ultimately structurally fix many of the things that are around us. And the same is true in the United States, in Britain, in France, and so forth and so on. This is not a new fact. And I want to make a stronger statement than that. High-tech will create better jobs. Not just the same jobs. Think about a 19th century worker here in Greece or anywhere in Europe 150 years ago. They would not have had any kind of access to information, any kind of communication. They wouldn't have had phones at all, right? They would have worked in their narrow little thing doing the same thing over and over again. Their access to what was going on in the market, the world, was very, very limited. And it's so difficult for us as humans to anticipate big changes like this because our minds are linear. What I'm going to call network power and the rise of computing. Greece has a long history as a port, marine trading center. That was a network. It's still a network. Much of your economic growth is related to shipping, distribution, ports, and so forth and so on. Those networks are important, and they're important to you for your economic growth. The same is true for information. A long time ago, computers were not networked together. You had one machine, it was on its own. You didn't scale, you would just sat there. But now your machine is really part of a network of intelligence. And this network intelligence gives you ability to build scaled solutions that change everything. So, technologists here in Athens could easily invent something that would change the way we think about artificial intelligence, or distribution, or commerce, or anything. There's no limit to human creativity. And this may seem scary, right? Smart computers may seem scary to you all, but they shouldn't be. That people working with smart computers themselves get smarter, and they should become more productive as a result. It's interesting that Adam Schmidt, computers will help us organize our skill sets and retrain us and so forth in all the ways that you can imagine. But I think the economy has led to sort of longer work hours in much of the developed world. But my prediction is that this knowledge economy will likely be replaced by this economies that I'm going to call human-centric, creative, and caring economies. That's what we're going to do. There's lots of data that suggests that this creative economy has adapted successfully to this first wave of digitization. There's been lots of growth of the production of music, video, film, books, and video games, and so forth, from UK, France, Germany, Greece, Russia, what have you.
Thank you very much. It was necessary. And the combination of the two allows you, gives you opportunities, but requires change. You spoke about venture capital. You spoke about a favorable tax regime. Is there any other more specific advice you would give to the Greeks in these difficult times?
Again, I want to be I want to be very respectful for the discussions that you have already had. I'm your visitor, and you probably know more. I think that the importance of jobs and job creation cannot be understated. It's time for job creation to occur here. If it doesn't get fixed relatively soon, you'll have deeper problems than you've already faced. The best thing that I can think of is try to figure out a way to get it so that you can create a business in one day, have a series of technological or job fairs where people who have money come to Greece to see the talent, get the Greek citizens to pitch, run courses on how to get money made. In other words, classic early stage venture capital. And this has worked in other countries. Having technology hubs, there's been discussions here in Athens about having some technology hubs. Technologists need some space. Google will obviously help to do what we can with our tools, and we're already free, which is always helpful. Try to eliminate all the barriers to that. And then the Greek citizens can take the rest of it.
And perhaps a very different question. There is also the dark side at the moment. In this world of networking and interconnectedness, should we not be afraid
that privacy is very important, And we combine privacy with security. Privacy is something that you need to think about. You need to think about how much information you want to share. Do you want to post all those pictures of yourself because they're not going to go away? Do you want to say all those things because they're always recorded? That's your decision. We have a role for security. We need that usage, and that's concerning to us. There's a huge pushback in America over this. It was crossing the line. So even in the dysfunctional politics of America, this was seen as too much. And I hope that European governments do not adopt a similar invasive approach.
One thing perhaps we understand this country is dysfunctional politics. Who would like to ask the first? Be ready.
There's a gentleman here with his hand up.
Please. We have to serve it with us, it's not brain drain. So one of the key aspects of the prize is that the best of Greece's talent actually leaves the country. And recently, we've seen a wave of very successful tech startups here in Greece. Actually, the first acquisition of a high-tech startup from a Nasdaq-listed company happened just a few days ago. But if you ask all of those startups, their dream is basically to migrate to the Bay Area.
Because of the concentration of technical talent here and the relatively low wages and low entry prices, it's possible to build quite a significant company here in technology, in my opinion. If you move yourself to the Bay Area, well, it's much, much harder to get that talent, simply because of competition. And so I like the narrative that companies get founded, because you've been working on it. It takes a long time. But as long as the talent is there, the investment is there, you're doing fine.
We're president to have cost-oriented wholesale cars, and companies like yours are getting a free ride on their networks. They have to upgrade constantly their networks for the sake of allowing companies like you.
Είχαμε λεφτά το καφέ.
Yes, and I think that's a very, very good question. It's true of essentially all business.
From the National Technical University of Athens. I want to come back to the question of brain drain. As I witnessed every day several young and quite talented people who rush go out from Greece to find some better environment for developing their careers. I want to be a little bit critical on what you have said us today and about your urge to promote entrepreneurship and innovation and all of these nice things. At the very same time, I know that you are pressing the US government